opened a bunch of these examples that I liked that we can look at in order to understand and think about the document object model some more. So the document object model is this, like I said in your lectures, it's like basically like a sitemap. So here's the picture from the book. You remember this like HTML, then it breaks into the head and the body and the divs and the different paragraphs that are in your page. So it's basically like a sitemap of just your one page, your HTML page, basic HTML page. And that is how you can access and change different elements on your page with JavaScript. So let's look at some more of these examples, and at the same time, while we're looking at these examples, we can talk about the different aspects of JavaScript and HTML that are like mixing together here, and like further reiterate what functions are and what methods are, like what all the bits are and how we make them exist. So let's run this one again. So this little page, we run it, and it uses this alert function that makes a little pop-up box, and it says whatever we want in the box. And then to dismiss it, all we can say is okay, just to make it go away. So I'm sure that you all have seen this before. It's the pop-up box. It's like this super annoying means of advertising that has existed on the internet more before 2020 or before like 20, I don't know, 15. It was like more common, I feel like, in the past, but it definitely is still like there's a lot of them. And but they were not intended to be annoying advertisements when they were made. No one had even thought that was going to be a thing. So so let's like break down this page and like see what the different parts are here. So the first thing that we see up here is we have this attribute in the body tag called onload. And that's like we can have, you know, a style or whatever equals, right? And then we would put our CSS style in there. Or we could have like a width or height. We can like embed different things into the body tag. Onload is one of those things. And it runs when the page is loaded. So onload. And it's actually something that belongs to JavaScript. I don't know if we have it here. No, it's somewhere in this column, like onload, you will find onload. So it's a JavaScript method, but we can like put it into the HTML tag. So we're gonna look in this class at onload and onClick, because they're kind of like the most common and the most simple, but there are tons of them. So if we look over here on this column right here, so if we look at this column right here, there's a whole list of events. Some of them I don't entirely even understand, like abort or animation. But then there's like after print, can play, so can something play? Can it play through? Change, click, copy, cut, drag. So that a lot of them are actions that you do with your mouse, right? The end of a drag here, entering into dragging, leaving, starting. Focus. So focus being like when we did the styling of A tags, when we like focus on them, it's that moment of clicking. In and out. So even like going in and out of it. Changing from full screen to not. right? There's all of these different input is like when you input some text into a form field. Key down, and key press, and key up, loading data, etc., etc. Mouse down, mouse over, mouse move, all these things. So all of these things are user behaviors. Some of them are web page behaviors as well, like the loaded one, for example, scrolling, searching. And I just wanted to like take a moment to give this a little bit of attention because in the politics of the web and the technology and politics, like mixture of the web, we talk about like tracking users and surveillance of users and all these things. And it's like here you can see a little bit of how it's done. It's just like it's right there in your basic JavaScript, which is like not even like a high-end like complicated language of the internet. It's like the one of the most basic ones. But we have all this stuff. Like look at all of this information we could collect, right? We could track all sorts of behavior. My mouse going around this page, and like start to derive information from it. If we wanted to, we could like have statistics and analysis. So that could be useful because you could be like, oh, this part of my web page is visited more, so like maybe I should focus my development on that aspect rather than like another one that's not visited as often. But it's also like you're like now collecting data that people don't necessarily know that you're collecting. If you wish to collect it, you can analyze it and you can make predictions based on that data. So it's kind of like we're entering into the world of all of that. So we're not going to be doing that, obviously, but I just wanted to take a moment to look at this because this is like the basic elements, the basic things that just come baked in. Like nobody wrote anything special to add this to JavaScript. This is like the basic stuff, and it's like right there, right in it. And so that's like something to think about if you're interested in that kind of stuff. Yeah, so okay, the interactions that we have on the web. All right, so then if we have this onload that happens when we load our page, we can tell it to do something. And in this case, what it's doing here is it's saying run this function. So a function is a group of instructions that we encode in JavaScript or in programming in general that tells, it's like a block of code that will run when triggered. So everything inside of a function is like a little block, like a little tiny stack that is just going to sit there and wait patiently until we trigger it. So in this case, this is our function, and it's this basic alert thing. And you can see the structure of a function is it has a name. This one is a user-defined name, so we could change it. And it has 2 parentheses after it, and then it has curly brace, open and close, that contains the instructions. And that looks a lot like what we looked at in CSS with the media at rules, right? It has like, in CSS it was called at media, whereas here we're defining the name, and then it had like in parentheses it would have like the conditions, like if the screen is this big, then only then do something. And then in the brackets it had like all the things it was going to do. So this is a very similar structure. But here we're defining ourselves, what's going on. So if I called this greeting, like I can, let's say I wanted to make a function that was called greeting instead. So if I have it here and I rerun this, nothing happens, right? And the reason that nothing is happening is because there is no greeting function in this code. There's my function, but there's no greeting function, so it's not going to run. And so if I change this to greeting, yes, wrote it correctly, and I run it, then it greets me. And I say, okay, hi, good. So that's what this aspect of the structure is. And then here you can see it says the word function. So in JavaScript, when you define something, which can be basically a function or a variable, maybe a string is also something that could be defined in JavaScript, a string being something that's in between two parentheses. First, you say that thing. You say that word. So here it's like function greeting. Like if we wanted to make a variable, I would write var x, variable x. And you can see it turns blue. So it's like a native word, keyword inside of JavaScript. So I'm saying, when I write the word function down, I'm saying, hey, JavaScript, I'm about to make a new function. I'm going to call it greeting. I'm not going to pass it any information, so I don't need anything in the brackets, but I will tell you what greeting does. And in this case, what greeting is doing is it makes an alert happen and it says something. And so I can say, I can change what it's saying. So that's the action that it's doing. And there's another thing that you can see here, and that is that this alert is a function too, right? So there's the word. You can see by the structure, kind of. There's the parentheses and the semicolon. So it's actually calling a function. And then alert happens to take a string. It takes like something in quotes and it presents it to you. So you can put a function inside of another function. Or you could define your own. So one thing I could do in here is I could declare a variable x inside the function, for example. And then I could say x equals 10. So I'm setting x to 10. When I have this equal sign, just imagine like an arrow coming out of this 10 and like going into the x. So I'm passing that information and like stuffing it into the x. So then if I say alert x, it should say 10. All right, cool, 10. And similarly, if I, change this to something else, nothing, ooh, my screen just froze. Nothing happens, right? So even if I define all this information, I made this new block of code, this little stack that makes x happen, that tells x that it's 10, and then that makes the alert and like tells us what x is. Even though I changed that and it's all sitting there and like existing happily, we know it works because I ran it before. If I don't call it, then it's not going to do anything. So that's the other, that's some like keywords there. So I guess we kind of learned about functions, calling functions. That's this aspect of saying, when you load, run hello world. I'm calling it. Then declaring functions, that's what's happening here. I'm declaring it. Inside of this function, I am declaring a variable. and then I am passing the value 10 into the variable. And then I'm running alert with the value 10, or with the variable. This can also be described as passing the variable to alert, right? I'm passing that variable now into alert. Yeah, so that's a lot of information. Let me properly comment it. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this into Atom.